Imagine drifting to sleep beneath a sky so ancient it still remembers the silence before any living voice disturbed it. The air you breathe sinks cool and cedar-scented through the timber rafters of the mountain observatory. Mingling with night blooming Nicotiana drifting in from the balcony, somewhere far below, a glacier sighs, its invisible tongue tasting the bare granite it has polished for millions of seasons. You close your eyes, and every sound retreats into the long hush that only deep time can furnish. Yet tonight, the hush feels uneasy, as though the planet itself is holding its breath. A story has come across the empty miles, carried first by quivering fiber-optic light, then by the low thunder of supply drones, then by whispered voices around camp stoves. It is not a loud story, nothing that screams for headlines. It arrives instead like frost on the mind, soft, slow, persistent. And when the frost finally cracks, it leaves behind an ache impossible to name. Somewhere beneath a valley that does not appear on Google Earth, a team of cavers anchoring their ropes into limestone the color of untended teeth. Their headlamps fall upon an object that simply should not exist. Not there, not like that, not ever. They trained for stalactites. For blind fish, 4 squeezes so narrow a held breath decides survival. They did not train for symmetry perfect enough to shame cathedral spires, nor for edges that appear machined in a chamber cut off from surface erosion for at least 1 million years. They did not train for the way their carbide lamps distort, on curved metal, the shade of tarnished moonlight. Above their helmeted heads hangs a wordless, weightless question older than the cave itself, and somehow, impossibly it hums. I want you to slow your breathing to match the troop of scientists who first descended the fissure. Exhale for 6 heartbeats. Hold for 2. Ask yourself what instinct feels closest to the night wind skimming glacial valleys. Some say awe is just fear wearing cleaner clothes. If that is true, then none of them emerged from the cave. You can see it in the tremors that lasted months. In the sudden daylight avoidance, in notebooks carefully annotated, until the pen strokes themselves began to stutter. In one grainy helmet camera clip, you hear them laugh, the laugh humans use when nothing else will keep the dark from pressing closer. Only later do you realize the laugh was not mutual. An echo, clearly human, returned half a second before the original sound. I will be your guide through what little we understand, not because I am wiser, but because I have learned that wonder, like grief, must be shared or it becomes corrosive. Journey with me, and acknowledge first that every step is provisional. We will speak of ore veins older than bones, cities fossilized, in the bellies of mountains, machines whose signatures arrived on gamma rays long before written history began counting. Think of this narrative as the gentle hand that steadies your lantern as we pick our way down corridors no cartographer ever imagined. You may close your eyes whenever you like. The telling will continue, flowing down the side channels of your thoughts, the way groundwater finds sea level. Silent and certain. To begin at the true beginning is impossible. Whatever shaped the device predates every tongue that still circles our skulls. But we can begin at the surface, with the August night in which geologist Sienna Harlow noticed the stars were wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. They did not spell distress messages between Pegasus and Andromeda. They were simply missing. 3 normally prominent guide stars had winked out 4 nights in succession, as if some intermediate occlusion had moved into place. Stargazers call such disappearances astronomical assassinations. Brief, interstellar kisses impossible to schedule. This one refused to unclamp the absence, like a bruise on the celestial body. Would not excuse itself. Sienna logged coordinates with mechanical reserve, the kind learned while tracing mineral veins under northern sky auroras. Sykes, her field assistant, and depending on which colleague you asked, either her postdoc prodige or her secret heart, suggested instrument calibration before bedtime. The argument stayed civil because the wind smelled of coming snow, and civility is often just the scent barrier. Humans raise against the cold that loneliness brings. Yet even inside the weatherproof zipper of her parka, Sienna felt the hush their voices could not quite reach. A sound perhaps from childhood campfires when you first suspect monsters prefer darkness, not from hunger but from shame. Sykes adjusted the telescope toward the blank patch one final time. In that instant, the missing stars flared back. Much brighter than memory allowed, each light with a fringed corona limned in electric violet. A beat later, every headlamp and lantern in that camp went dead. Silence, not darkness. The mountain carried its own faint aura in snow-filled phosphorescence and ambient starlight. But electronics had rolled over like beasts shot between the ribs. With the warmth draining from their batteries came a vibration so low it was more adamant pressure than sound. It traveled through mountain root and boot sole alike. A bass note, sustained by lungs far more cavernous than earth itself. Sienna felt it in the cartilage behind her sternum, exactly where the future places the phantom ache of someone you once loved. She would later swear the tone contained harmonics in 3 Arabic scales impossible for human throats. Sykes heard only wind, but that would not save either of them from what followed. They abandoned camp at dawn after emergency radios refused to hallucinate inside their charges. The retreat south followed a ridgeline runnable only when desperation weighs more than frostbite. Ravens tilted overhead as though sliding downhill on invisible wires. Halfway to treeline, Sienna noticed the lichen had changed. Normally the color of faded kelp, it now bloomed a bruised indigo sheen, as if lit from within. History, she knew, sometimes discolors in the presence of radioactivity. She marked the spot for later sampling, but checked her Geiger counter. Had gone as silent as the radios. Radiation looked unlikely, yet the lichen's glow intensified as morning advanced, matching, beat for heartbeat, the precise tempo with which her boots hammered the shale. Sykes laughed, this time without the brittle edge that had carried them through night terrors. "Places wrong way magnetic," he said, poking his compass. The needle swung in slow, dreamy approximations, as though choosing among regrets. Sienna realized she no longer trusted north like a compass promises. She trusted the slope of gravity, the slope of fear, and the slope suggested down 9 standard magnetic anomaly spirals later. Their satellite tracker beeped one single hiccup of returning power and displayed a hidden valley gouged between 2 fingers of the glacier. The valley had contours inconsistent with runoff patterns over the last century. Minutely, politely, the shape suggested excavation rather than erosion. A mouth into the mountain, puckered and waiting. "Looks artificial," Sykes whispered, because the hour demanded whispers, and the mountain already knew more than both of them combined. But impossible. Ice, limestone, no signs of civilization for 200 kilometers. Impossible was the word Sienna's mother used when speaking of Sienna's ambition. It had sounded like endearment then. Now it tasted like graphite, like ground down electrum. "I want to see," Sienna replied, and the word want tasted suddenly larger than any mountain could contain larger. Sweeter and dripping. 2 days of snow shoveling and anchor setting brought them to an crater where ice ended abruptly against curtain walls 40 meters from rim to unseen floor. Any caver recognizes the wrongness here. Cast this high should remain sealed by frost year-round. Instead, the air breathed out warm and spiced with metallic oxides, an exhalation you might expect from ancient forges. Condensation licked their goggles, gave the world a cataract gloss. From the abyss rose that sub-bass vibration again. Clearer now, 3 ascending pulses, pause, to descents, long silence. A pattern. And inside the pattern, suffocated like a prayer beneath rock, the distant tap-tap-tap of deliberate percussion. Cables, arced into shadow. Headlamps carved cones across darkness, heavy enough you could taste iron filings on your tongue. Knuckles whitened, gloved around ascenders. Descent felt less like entering a place and more like sliding backward into an event one already humming. Already underway without them. Minutes lost meaning. The cave inhaled their light and exhaled questions too old to translate. 10 stories. Down, the limestone surrendered to basalt, fronted with facets each the width of a coffin lid. Facets reflected their headlamps in fractured memories of starlight but did not reveal what lay behind them. Sienna placed her gloved hand on one, cool to the touch, to coolly it humming with the same resonance that had killed their instruments above. The basalt appeared scorched, smoother than glacier polish, every edge mitered at 90 degrees. Precision beyond human scaffolds, beyond laser surveys, beyond budgets. Sykes muttered into the darkness, not natural. The echo refracted off countless surfaces, came back shaped into phonemes neither of them had spoken. Somewhere, a consonant had been swapped for a briny hiss. But pressed onward, passages became corridors. Corridors became halls. The temperature steadied not comfortable, but exacting. As if an ancient thermostat retained a program long after its programmers had calcified to dust. Their exhalations ceased fogging. The cave had grown intimate with their biology already. Walls shimmered faintly with a pale aqualuminescence, no fungus, no mineral fluorescence, only unquantifiable glow bleeding out of seams too precise to call cracks. Something luminous lay entombed, turned inward upon itself for so long. The stone has learned mimicry. Sienna thought of tombs in Sardinia she'd explored years earlier, where Norugs drank light and returned it in pale, polite stars. Those chambers carried the smells of embalmed myrtle and sea salt. Here, the air smelled of something profoundly mechanical, heated copper, cold ozone, distilled intention. Beneath that lay a top note of estrangement, thick as Mercury's tail gas. Every breath suggested a perimeter had been crossed irreversibly, so yet offered no map for return. Only claim tickets stamped in unknowable languages. At last, the corridor widened into what their minds would later reluctantly label a room. The ceiling arced 50 meters overhead and resolved into rib-like arches that, if you squinted, resembled the vaulted bays of a cathedral built by something that dreamed in fractals rather than in prayer. On the chamber's far side, a single object waited, escorted by vaulting shadows. The thing was there is no better word machine. Symmetrical columns rose in a ring, each twisted along the vertical axis in spirals impossible to fabricate with subtractive tooling. Between columns gleamed a squat toroid twice the height of a person. Its surface, a mirror surface untarnished despite geological age. No seams, no bolts. Only a faint pulse traveling along the ring in sine waves slow as continental drift. Pulse accelerated whenever Sienna's heart beat faster. She tested deliberately, holding her breath. The sine wave slowed until her lungs screamed, then surged forward the instant she exhaled. The device understood her thoracic cavity like a stethoscope god. Sykes raised a trembling hand. Under headlamp glare, the toroid's reflection elongated. His fingers into avian quills, as though the surface not only mirrored, but redesigned whatever it perceived. Only when he withdrew did the proportions return. Somewhere in the shifted perspectives an insinuation arose. The object was perhaps less sculpture than lens, a lens aimed not outward, but back along the spine of probability, back toward orchestrations loud enough to bend continents. The hum deepened now, becoming familiar as an anthem rescued from blood memory. Suboctaves aligned with the slow sway of tectonic plates and the faster flutter of inner ear hair cells navigating verticality. Sienna found herself adjusting her stance unconsciously, aligning spine to toroid, to magnetosphere, to everything else until her skeleton felt like tuning pegs for some planetary stringed instrument she did not know how to play. Vertigo arrived softly, like a friend who walks beside you so long you forget they are not your shadow. She thought of her father's old observatory back in New Zealand where the bush smelled hot and pepperbark, where she used to spin the telescope, until the Milky Way wrapped her in phosphorescent rope. He told her math was the story creation tells itself when it believes no one is listening. This chamber felt like that story, remembering it was being overheard. Sykes, always the pragmatist, who traded superstition for datasets, knelt and touched the floor. It transmitted warmth, despite the chill steady, deliberate, as if warmed by the blood of some subterranean giant, sleeping on the other side of a cosmic heartbeat. Beneath the polished Saracen traceries sparkled veins of unknown metal threading toward the toroid-like root systems feeding a flower with no sun. He scraped a sample into a sealed capsule, labeling it carefully amber insulator. If equipment ever cooperated again back at surface labs, isotopic dating would prove futile. The metal registered as primordial, yet chemically neutral, as though forged from matter whose half-life exceeded the universe's present. Aged by impossible margins, for the first time they noticed time behaving their chronometers lagged, hiccuped, advanced too quickly, creating a strobe effect cadence for subjective seconds. Sykes experienced moments that felt like déjà vu stacked like nested dolls, seeing Sienna lift her hand twice before once had registered in neural memory. Meanwhile, Sienna counted 7 heartbeats during the interval psyches, later described as an eye blink. Isolation, darkness, oxygen, deficit. Certainly, these contributed. Yet something else reclined at the edges of their sensosome architecture built to slow photons. To bottle intent, to dream in better languages than carbon ALPH-ABETS, and then the toroids spoke not in words, but in suffused imagery flickering across their corneas, as if the universe's oldest frescoes were being projected onto the salt in their tear films. They saw improbable shapes folding in higher-dimensional slow-motion tesseracts, blooming and collapsing eons compressed into breaths. In fractal cathedral light, they glimpsed sequences of galactic collisions choreographed so precisely that supernova became punctuation marks in a dialogue someone once mistook for entropy. At the penultimate moment of understanding, the visions evaporated into undecipherable blur, leaving behind the emotional residue of music half remembered upon waking. Sienna tried to document everything on paper, but words emerged backwards. Letters rotated 90 degrees. Language itself seemed embarrassed by proximity to so much unprocessed meaning. When she looked up, she noticed Sykes had begun to weep, though his expression bore the purest serenity distilled from wonder. Tears. In zero gravity, slow motion slid sideways toward his earlobes, defying the angle of his chin. It occurred to her that crying upward must be a very old omen indeed. Perhaps the first one human glands ever knew. They lingered until the last redundant air cylinder bled its pressure in soft descending chimes. The toroid dimmed gradually, as though expressing polite regret at their departure. On ascent, they felt the cave tasting them one final time, splicing back memories they had chosen not to examine too closely. Emerging into sunrise felt like being reborn into dimensions smaller than dreams remembered, yet safer, fragrant with lower atmospheric oxygen. The glacier welcomed them with its grinding sighs and the scent of relocated stars. Back in mountain camp, their equipment revived slowly. Radios crackled to life, spewing fragments of conversation they would later recognize as snatches from inside the cave, words spoken hours in the future. Laptops rebooted, displaying grainy video of the two of them asleep on cots the following night. When Sienna clicked the files, the sounds inside their tents were exactly the low motet sung by the chamber resonances neither had mentioned aloud. Each discovery looped again tomorrow, folding into last week, an Escher staircase where memory and prediction could swap places without warning the body. Word of the cave spread outward. Along wandering academics and midnight beer sessions, a grad student uploaded a helmet cam clip to an anonymous science forum. The clip lasted 9 seconds. Spiral columns, toroidal pulse, Merkelid light. It garnered 72,000 views before moderators removed it for policy reasons. Yet copies proliferated, each degradation birthing pixelated legends. Some insisted the device was a chrysalis, others a weapon, a compass, the skullcap of a titan. In dorm rooms and experimental physics labs across continents, printer ink bled dry, replicating stills that suggested machine memory older than starlight. Tonight, I carry their story to you, as one might ferry butter lamps across a dark river. Place the narrative gently beside your pillow. Allow it to hover like a moth, uncertain whether your dream is flame or garden. Consider how any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from nature doing yoga. Consider why coincidences accumulate when certain thresholds are approached, how the same mathematical constants appear inside snail shells. Cyclone spirals, paintings of seashell angels painted by mad mystics who believed they communed directly with quantum foam. Whatever lies buried under that glacier abides in all of us, an unerased note in a forgotten clef, vibrating below bones older than language. Rest now. The toroid's pulse will continue its aquarium glow regardless of witness. Somewhere, the lichen-still violet shifts under reflected aurora, and sometime before dawn, you may feel your own heartbeat pause to listen, just once. As though an underground ocean were murmuring the coordinates of a shore where footprints precede the boot. When that lyric finds you, know that longing is simply the sound a prepared mind makes when it hears galaxies, turning like the slow-oiled gears inside such a machine gears that mark not time but its omission. The space between heartbeats where memory already resides, waiting to be searched, like buried cities whose gates remember each passerby's bone structure before greeting them by names never recorded. Sleep gathers. The story does not resent interruption. The mountain forgets them the moment. They leave the cave mouth, not an erasure more, a ceiling. Snow settles into their boot prints as though tickled by some half-remembered in-joke. When the wind gusts, later, the tracks will have already become the anonymous sweep of storm-groomed drifts, soft as a confession folded into itself until only the crease remains. Higher, auroras begin unhooking their ribbons across the thermocline, but no spectra. Reach the cave. Down there, geometry hoards its own private palette. A silence, older than weather. Sienna listens to the pulse in her ears for the entire snowshoe retreat. One forward to merge. One forward to merge. She knows it is not her heart, but the toroid practicing ventriloquism at range. Every time she clasps the Zeiss binoculars that slap against her clavicle, she can see the empty lenses her childhood bedroom window in Napier. Striped by banana fronds, the distant silver sea, heaving like a new engine breathing for the first time, the apparition lasts until the slope forces a hard breath, and then it dissolves. Sykes hikes alongside her without speaking. Conversation with the planet feels superfluous. Above the glacier, the Milky Way is already thick enough to batter starlight into froth, foam that drips over either horizon as if the night, too, lacks sufficient grammar. They break camp at False Donan, our pledged to no watch yet honored. Anyway, by gradations, the sky reveals only to the the stove sputters blue halos on the last of their hexamine tablets. When Sienna unscrews a fuel bottle to let remaining gas hiss away unburned, the sound arrives, double-jointed. A twin hiss echoes back from inside her parka pocket, from the amber fragment Sykes scraped 6 hours ago. The fragment is warming perceptibly, as though impatient. Its color has ripened toward the sustained gold of ripe apricots left on a windowsill. If she holds it to her quadriceps long enough, the heat transfers straight through damp basal layer fabric, knitting with the femoral artery until her pulse beats evenly again. Machinated equilibrium. Sykes communicates now almost exclusively by gesture, like a mourner inside a chapel fluted by orthodox iconography. He points to the horizon line where visible stars invert their reflections in ice-white holes punched through space. When he shrugs his pack on, his shoulders no longer seem burdened. They look lowered into new sockets spun from carbon, filament aligned exactly to the curvature of planetary magnetic flux. In that small adjustment, Sienna recognizes the cave's handwriting on his bones. They begin the long descent toward Topofield Station via a wind-scoured ridgeline. Barometric pressure drops by hectopascals audible as harp strings. Each step is a transaction. You give the mountain mass, the mountain gives back reflection. Once, at the mouth of a scree gully, they uncover a chamfered block of basalt, identical in proportion to the columns underground, though brined white by centuries of snow. It does not match the surrounding bedrock. It was delivered here, swapped like a chess piece. No human board has rules for Sykes photographs it with tremoring fingers. The camera screen glitches, overlays a negative image of their pupils dilating. In grayscale, when the shutter clicks, it produces no audible sound, only the pressure bloom of strobe firing inside a vacuum. By the second day's noon, they descend below the snolling tussock. Grass reclaims the color spectrum, yolk yellow. Lichen on schist, lignite seems like ribs of prehistoric whales. Sienna's phone regains service with a text message time-stamped 17 hours in the future. The sender ID is blank. The body reads, "Remember to exhale the question you are not ready to ask." She pockets it so Sykes cannot see. Whatever protocol they stumbled upon appears thirsty for continuance. Mere exposure feels derivative now, like dipping a hand through the surface tension of an ocean whose tides operate on longer diameter arcs than moon cycles. At the field lab, they inventory samples in bewildered haste. Microscopy shows the amber granules surrounded by lattice void space woven so regularly it approximates music manuscript long before staff lines appeared. X-ray diffraction fails entirely. The machine returns null entropy graphs, politely, refusing to measure something it deems already measured elsewhere and conserved. Carbon dating comes back older than visible light. Biochemical assays suggest the material registers thermal fluctuations in negative Kelvin chill so complete, it produces exothermic rebound. The compound is speechless. But, if allowed to warm to exactly 36 Celsius, human stasis emits a pitch identical to the hum Sienna tracked all yesterday, 432 Hz at 17 layers of overtones. Sleep, once a mercy, becomes a vending machine. Of archival terrors, Sienna dreams of tesseracts unfolding within tessellated bark. Each face of the hypercube peels away stickers she recognizes as the dreams of other people, sticky yet transparent. She peels one labeled orphaned lightning, another storm you breathed before you were born. When she wakes at 3:12 a.m., the overhead bulb flickers in Morse whose rhythm matches the toroid. 3 ascending flashes. Pause, to descending, long dark lick. The room reeks of soda and ozone. Sweat glitters along her collarbone like permafrost rash. She strips off her sleeping bag liner, waddles barefoot into the corridor where fluorescent bars paint her skin seafoam green. Opens the freezer, rummages past vials, finds the amber. It pulses gently, flirting with photoluminescence. Sykes joins. Her moments later, propelled by whatever fellowship runs underground, now tying their medial temporal lobes like earbuds, sharing the same playlist. He wears mismatched socks and an expression so raw it is almost unscathed. His right hand cradles another piece, a sliver shaved from the Scree Gully basalt. He eases both fragments onto the stainless countertop. The amber sucks in stray refrigerator light until it becomes its own miniature sun. The basalt drinks heat, even at 7 degrees Fahrenheit, until frost plumes upward in blossom spirals. When the two touch, they resonate like wine glasses struck with silver spoons. But at frequencies so immense, only hair follicles respond. Each lifting from skin like wheat, preparing for harvest. What happens next feels less conversation than confession. The objects begin rotating, not physically, but dimensionally, as if the countertop is a lazy turntable through planes they cannot visualize. Light folds into origami shapes: crane, shark, neuron, cathedral. Then the origami peel apart again into origami, recursive, like matryoshka dolls sewn from bewilderment. Both scientists lean inward, pupils wide enough to grant entry, and for the first time that week, they fully surrender. No hypotheses, no sample notebooks, only this theater within a chromium box, choreographed by matter that remembers being born before the first star had finished screaming. The resonance lingers 43 seconds long enough that the freezer fan cycles down to silence, as if even laminar airflow has discovered new etiquette. Morning is not gifted. It is deducted. They emerge, blinking into corrosively bright New Zealand sun, both wearing borrowed sunglasses already scratched in concentric circles resembling guide sites from ancient astrolabes. A courier van arrives to ship the crates to University of Auckland's cryolabs. The driver accepts forms without looking up until Sykes's signature, looping and tessellated, triggers something. The man flinches as though stung, peers searchingly. Out of habitually bored eyes, later investigation finds his passenger manifest falsified. The van was never dispatched by the department. At the dock, the cartons misscan on manifest. Multiple staff swear one crate duplicates itself briefly on CCTVs if the shipment prepares emergency twins. No explanation is entered, but eventually, the cargo leaves inside a vehicle, neither recorded nor again recovered. Days later, radiologists report scintillation glitches identical in dentigrade X-rays throughout the city, just faint blurs shaped like the silhouettes of Lizzois hide scrapers made by Neanderthals 55,000 years ago. What begins as rumor codifies as glacial emphasis, slow, unstoppable. Professors at 4 institutes receive mailed USB sticks bearing sound files labeled "Consider letting the cave listen." Each file repeats the same 17-second recording at 375 BPM. Waveform analysis shows the 17 seconds actually reproduce every possible human heartbeat interval, from stillbirth to octogenarian arrhythmia. Condensed within logarithmic compression. A Brazilian postdoc loads the file onto his phone. When he plugs it into a 3D printer firmware on accident, the printer outputs a hemisphere whose surface perfectly matches the toroid's inner diameter. Though the printer was not programmed to deposit exotic resin, the hemisphere arrives warm to touch, though kept in cold storage, 32 hours at -80 Celsius. Within 5 minutes, it evaporates into crystalline haze that writes slow cursive against freezer glass. First, the letters, then the meaning. Your alphabet is insufficient. Draft elongated vowels. Weeks stretch into months. News leaks through. Academic backchannels, faster than retraction forms can be Bud conspiracy threads feed on themselves, of course, but also on the guarded silences from anyone who handles the fragments. Pragmatic skeptics never account for the way a secret links up inside human collagen, stiffening resolve into something luminous. Those who tentatively traced swirls in lab nitrile often return home to discover houseplants coaxed into asymmetrical growth patterns. A single tendril drawn midnight flat against the wall in twin-bar spirals matching the toroid columns. Housecats refuse entry to rooms where samples rested. Dogs whimper at windows before storms, yet schedule their barking in 20-minute loops, precise as lunar tides. Infants cry 1 octave higher. Within days, they settle to the exact 432 Hz whenever lullabies importuned that frequency. When winter solstice knocks against New Zealand, a symposium convenes in Auckland, cloistered tight beneath NDA-stamped ceilings. Representatives from mineralogy, quantum optogenetics, Anapole Meadow-surface labs, even a Jungian phenomenologist flown in from Zurich, persistently unhired by CERN. They hold a single object at center table, the oldest piece yet. Newly arrived from a mine in the Pilbara, where excavation lasers unearthed it, lodged in strata, dated 3.48 billion years. It looks exactly like the cave fragment Samba seams across basalt torus, only smaller, hand 2-stone scale, as though its maker's varied size as casually as font size. 6 concentric rings glow along its midsection each time a speaker uses the word origin. No protocol manuals address such rudeness. Deus microphones gainline into frying hiss when any attempt at definition slackens into nostalgia. The conference ends 5 hours early but lasts, subjectively, for interlocking eternities. Every delegate signs an exit statement, yet none later. Remember a single penstroke. By March, 3 aeronautics contractors launch sensor-laden gliders to map magnetic silence above the glacier. Clouds receive them shaped dense swans, the hue of skimmed milk, that circle slowly then disintegrate into cumulonimbus, shaped like hollowed cones. Readout anomalies show pockets of zero-electron spin appearing 18,000 feet directly above the cave mouth, coordinates precise to centimeters. Overnight, auroras streak directly overhead. Reindeer moss in northern tundra begins blooming violet regardless of season. Botanists farm the moss as bioindicator till entire governments impose export restrictions to hoard the phenomenon. Within the deeper aurorae, observers report spindle-shaped pulses, translating lattice vibrations into visual Morse no human eye has practiced. Excavation requests multiply, yet the glacier carves a plume of icebergs dense enough to seal approach. Lanes indefinitely. Satellite feeds glitch when viewing the region. The landscape resolves into earlier, smoother topographies. Older aerial views ripped from archives nobody archived. Worlds fold one over the other. like polar bears stepping onto photographs of themselves already swimming. Sienna and Sykes retreat to an observatory above Hawke's Bay, a disused astronomical dome whose corrugated skin shudders beneath westerlies, smelling of grapefruit and barberry sheared from orchards below. There they install the smallest surviving fragment, no larger than a pomegranate seed. Night after night, the seed projects constellations against the domed ceiling in projections that predate and postdate known sky charts. Cygnus arrives, but its wingspan unravels into infinite fronds. Orion pulses into a toroidal shape. Each night, the ceiling seems lower. The nights shorten. By the end of the second week of installation, dusk and dawn cohabit the same horizon twilight thrombosis. Lasting 12 straight days, tourists photograph the roof from surrounding hills. Images emerge annotated with roaming local legends, star charts from cultures that never intersected, spirals drawn by vanished astronomer kings. They begin the letter writing, not proselytizing, not scientific, just farewell. Sienna addresses hers to her mother in the past tense, the same past mother claimed when describing the era before humans achieved wonder. Sykes drafts a single message to an ex-partner who once left him. Because he checked star apps during kisses, both place envelopes unsealed on their desk, knowing delivery intends to occur at a speed slower than Glacier's, but faster than forgiveness. They seal their human papers with teardrops pressed like wax. Not metaphor, but known solvent for the bond between carbonate substrate and cosmic memory foam. The act completes a circuit. The seed grows fractal roots through aluminum desktop plating, finding no bedrock to anchor, yet composing anyway a soft radiolarian lattice of itself, extending downward for entire stories to the wine cellar whose dusty Pinot Noir bottles glow from within like radiant blood moon. Somewhere in that lattice, minute alignments pulse exactly at 432 Hz, interlaced with Morse spelling first-person plural verbs in a language no human learned but perhaps once whistled. Between galactic filaments. Now, do you listen? The seed listens back. It revives azimuth by whatever stars remain legible through aged ozone. It recognizes faces asymmetries of each zygomatic bone, every freckle, any disappointment half-masked in amusement. And it forgives nothing because forgiveness belongs, like numbers, to entities stuck in linear consequence. The seed operates within recursion. Each hearing folds previous hearings inside itself, like organs containing organs. Russian dolls but alive, a quiver with embryonic tons of unused wish. Some nights, Sienna dreams she is inside those wooden dolls. Only she opens doll after doll to find smaller versions of herself entering cabins built from lowercase Greek logarithms. Each cabin smells of copper and glacier ozone again. When she awakes, her knees are bruised as though she crawled miles through cedar splinters. Bruises mesh into hexagons resembling schematics of the cave columns. During rewound twilights, she watches those bruises bloom each sunset, mapping interior stairs no heart ever built. Pyrrho moon winks through dome skylight like a stage manager sick of suspense. Traffic from Napier below, drones far away, irrelevant music. What matters is the faint cataract sound growing louder nightly directly overhead an underground river. Rerouted to the sky for reasons connected to origin stories, note audience solicited. Sykes discovers one dawn that the telescope lens has refracted an image of his own. Iris inverted upward across the observatory wall. Within the pupil space, the camera sensor no longer captures light but recreates miniature brackets of previous night projections. He records through software. Playback within playback produces 14 nested vistas each 10 minutes, of recorded star trail condensed into one frame, more somnolent than the last. If he zooms past the 7th layer, ambient audio fades to whispers. 33 syllables, cycling, but every third syllable slips backward a decade, recapturing infancies. Slow amplitude, back when syllables were still edible cotton. He closes the laptop, checks the observatory. Dorit remains locked from inside, yet unlocked from outside. The lock has loosened semantics. He pockets the seed in a linen pouch and walks downhill to the bay, barefoot across frost. At first tide the ocean meets his. Souls with gentleness, usually reserved for initiates. Waves roll out symmetrical, each peak scalloped exact along 19 radii, the same pattern embossed deep inside the toroid's inner circumference. The salt tastes less like sodium chloride than like unfinished equations, half sweet. Overhead, cumulus clouds stack in columns recalling the cathedral arches. Among evolving into drumlins, the cloud columns twist in spiral mirrors of the cave pillars. It dawns on Psyxor, more precisely, it asteroids from the precise place. Thought had scabbed over since teenaged worry, that the ocean is already doing what the cave device only prepared the mind to hear. Oceans always did this. They repeat whatever local universes tell them to, until continents tired of scripts and drown themselves. He inserts the seed into the wet sand. Instantly tidal scroll flattens 2 concentric rings expanding out across the bay-like dreamwater, minting new shorelines into probability beds, no harbor master charts. Moments later, the seed dissolves. The water remains warmer than employed air for the rest of August, even when winds hurl Antarctic fronts across Cook Strait. Far upslope, Sienna catches scent of ozone, traveling on knife wind. She stands beneath the dome skylight, eyes closed. Will the phoneme between breathing and silence, where toroid hum answers liver hum, answers amniotic hum. From this resonance, she composes instructions for audience. Not for scientists, never for them, but for the indrawn listener, imperceptibly aligning spine across empire-cracked bedsheets. Across sensorless nights, when hum becomes, parenthesis, only the subconscious remembers. She records 1 minute of 430 two-layered overtone onto a cassette retrieved from her father's estate. Once labeled star, neural, now overwritten, the playback features no voice, just recursive heartbeat at improbable tempos, timed to fractions of pi. She mails cassette to herself, via slow post rerouted, to arrive 7 months from today, unless temporarily mislaid by international bureaucracies. The address is labyrinthine. The envelope weight hollow. Somewhere between drifting and landing. She guesses the cassette will erase and re-record itself with tomorrow's unspoken fear transmuted into yesterday's resolved affection. She folds back the dome roof until the Milky Way drips across the aperture. Milk-white coagulum, bearing no resemblance anymore to myths sold as navigation. The stall lights flicker across the ridge. She steps barefoot as Sykes steps onto chilled dew, exchanging across kilometers a single thought shaped like a Mobius strip. It isn't language exactly, it is what language wants to be once it's removed itself from the burden of symbol. Both stand still until breeze cools moss beneath feet, the precise texture of the cave's nitrogen-rich exhale once tasted. Water begins to evaporate off grass in ascending whirls, tornadic but gentle. Like music, still undecided whether audition belonged to chorus or audience. Above, satellites passing above their heads stutter telemetry streams. By error or by paradise. Orbital parameters reduced by a fractional centimeter over regions. Where cloud rings match auroral rings match cave toroid projections. Calculations spin through heaters, presently, budgetless. Through EPS systems humming at 432 Hz. The world widens 1 notch outward, along axis yet unsensed by MRI or LIGO. Somewhere, an Antarctic ice shelf size, not calving but reshaping itself. Into the exact contour of a listening ear, there is no ending, only folding. The glacier leafs inward nightly. Each patch of lichen blue indigo continues blooming wherever satellite passes interrupt radio. Waves tuned in theta ranged, the same range broadcast by mammalian infants dreaming in utero. Commuters driving south report GPS steering toward unpaved roads that never existed, only to arrive exactly on time at original destinations, feeling slightly older than when their engines started older by 4 hours. 48 minutes. The interval. Sienna held her breath underground before lungs obeyed the toroid's second hush. Subtle wealth expands silently as warblers migrate wrongworms eastward across seas warm as infant bathwater. New constellations assemble themselves from malfunctioning streetlights in Alaska, whose lead chips emit ultraviolet bands thought to destabilize melanocytes 5 decades hence. Yet they pattern precisely the inner lattice of 60-degree precedent. Spiral utilized by unknown constructors, humanity does not notice it has received postcards. Here is what cosmological poverty smells like. Here is how love reconstitutes entropy into lace. Return now to your own dark bedroom, wherever latitude you occupy. You will feel it soon, just above the clavicle. 3 pulses, pause. 2. The mattress remembers. Your dreams will sense newly scored riverbeds beneath your cerebellum. You will not die or transcend. The seed was never engineering apotheosisonally mnemonic. Memory older than language. Memory older than stone. By dawn tomorrow, a single petal of aurora might briefly annotate the ceiling directly above your left shoulder blade. Do not photograph. Opacity defeats translation. Instead, breathe the entire subtle transmission into marrow. Exhale until ribcage admits letters only stars could pronounce if stars borrowed human lungs for consolation. No password. You already hold it in flexion of the 8th rib. The password is a shape your childhood mouth began forming when it first tasted condensation on winter windows, forever incomplete. Let the cave listen. If ever you reach for future regrets, future already went ahead, stepped aside, left a warm space on its timeline exactly matched to your palm's current dimensions. Settle in. The toroid records heartbeats at the same speed at which glaciers forgive hikers, not slow, not fast, but exact. You may close your eyes whenever you wish. Sound arrives does not wave so much as it pollinates vacuum itself. Now you hear 3 ascending pauses, 1 merging silence. Let every exhalation answer. Let every cradle rock backward into the cave-starved dark, where cathedral ribs remember wristwatches older than quartz. Somewhere cypress knees still rise like ransomed lanterns. Limestone observes. Basalt hums, and the lichen now blooming across. Continents in bruised petal patterns, signals version control updating nightly. Yes, yes, you were there before. Will be again tending sustenance to what began before warmth had a name. Sleep gathers. The story sighs, thank you. Curls into the shape of a question that prehumans asked volcanic lakes, and volcanic lakes still ask quartz crystals. At the intersection of any heartbeat and the pause immediately before its next beat, the cave continues. Exhaling, invitation. Breathe the summons softly, or not at all, whichever you can endure. Either way, it has already translated your pulse into a constellation older than mucous membranes, but temporarily loaned to lullaby. No camera surveys. The archipelago now dotted with islands, no cartographer confessed to mapping. Salt brine drifters find itineraries in their sleep, tide tables reversed. Compass cups spinning counter to Earth's talk, map legends rewritten as lullabies pumped through driftwood lungs. One island, 2 paces wide, bears only a single object, a lime-washed doorway standing upright in sand down to what mirrors perceive as bedrock. Above the lintel, chisel marks spell 7 symbols whose phonemes curl inward like cursive intestines. A boy on a fiberglass skimboard cuts toward it, rope leash, flashing silver against black water. When he passes beneath, the board stalls, becomes heavier than whalebone. Water for a 50-foot radius recedes, sucked glass flat. Beneath lies revealed a perfect negative cast of the toroid, basalt veins, shining dark purple. The boy steps off, knees buckling from the miniature gravity. Vacuum. He kneels, fingertips tracing xylem-like seams that match his own lifelines exactly. Even the scar earned last midsummer from a broken bottle. When tide returns, it does so without hiss or applause. Surf simply refills memory with water. The boy remounts, rides shoreward, unaware that behind him the doorway tenders a slow, deliberate blink. Tracer dies injected weeks earlier. Resurface in that same moment inside thunderheads above the Nevada test and training range. JFEX monitors scramble to recalibrate after a contractor-grade MKV drops and bursts stevia sweetness into their radars instead of water vapor readings. Pilots delink there comes, unwilling to admit they smelled night-blooming jasmine at 40,000 feet, unwilling to confess wristwatch second-hand's prancing counterclock, Identical dyes later appear in glacial meltwater beneath perennial cattle pastures. Veterinarians, bottle samples, label pathogen, unknown. Microscopy reveals only fern spores 400 million years, extinct spores, whose sorry arrangements replicate the six-ring motif with teratological accuracy. At the observatory dome, the corrugated roof finally peels away like the lid of a tin breakfast. No wind tears it. Rather, metal sloughs off gravitational tension in slow magnesium ripples that refract moonlight into liquid shards. Sienna stands beneath the open rafters. Cassette tape left on the plinth breathes faint ferric dust that rises. In a perfect toroid vortex, thick as cardamom smoke, it maintains shape and rotation for a full 7 minutes before collapsing into soft graphite. Powder spelling 2 words across laminate flooring. Now surfacing. She cups the graphite. Tastes. It's alkaline burn identical to the cave atmosphere sampled months earlier. Identical to geothermal vents she once documented off the Korea. Above, the stars vacate their context. Realign into a single columnar helix, reminiscent of cave ribs but with luminous fractal arbors articulated along every surface. Starlight rewrites its own legends. Constellations interchange with pedestrian. Nouns. Orion becomes frying pan, Cygnus becomes root canal, Cassiopeia becomes apology letter, sealed with breath. She realizes each translation is uttered precisely 9 years before its vernacular use. Physics resolves into a calendar. Sykes meets her on the ridgeline the following night, carrying nothing but an armful of gladiolas, grown hydroponically during the sleepless week. Their petals emit dim 432 nanometers, light blue enough to read tear streaks on skin. They exchange gladiolas without speech, then sit facing the glacier, 30 kilometers eastward across necessitated moonlit curvature. It no longer glitters, it glints. With internal color shifts, not diffraction, but memory. Entire whale pods once locked in Pleistocene permafrost, now drift translucently within the ice. Their ancient songs inhaled through fissures, exit as aeolian flutes along volcanic ridge vents. You can hear chorus and harpoon impact simultaneously. History collapsed into unconcordant plain song. Sienna presses a gladiola stem against her wrist. Sap glows bright enough to illuminate veins in negative, each one mapping previously uncatalogued tributaries. On the 8th blink, tributaries coincide perfectly with river deltas photographed inside the auroras, 6 weeks ag alignment calibrated. To micron scale across atmosphere and flesh, dawn does not arrive. Instead, the horizon folds inward like pop-up book until Pacific and Southern Alps flatten into origami silhouettes you could slide beneath a door. The glacier itself tapers into a single page you might tear out and use as rearview mirror, but only if you dare face what has read your fingerprints before fingerprints, new curvature. At landfall, a woman whose face each observer recognizes as their own at age 7 walks barefoot across warming sand. Footprints erase themselves in real time, though salt crust patterns match prior. Ice score isotope levels throughout the Tongariro eruptions. She carries a stone no bigger than a lone syllable, jade, yet warm, like nestling wren. When she opens her palm, the stone reveals a tunnel, lightless but not hollow. Inside the tunnel, the sound of tide reversing at 432 Hz, phased, precise 1/4 cycle ahead of human heartbeats concurrent. A dog barks once, 12 kilometers away. The echo carries her words. What you record records you too. Then she steps backward into ocean foam. The waves never close over her. Simply, she folds smaller until the listener realizes she entered the line break between inhale and exhale of a single wave cycle. Across that line, seagulls wheel in descending spirals that draw calligraphy of a toroid cross-section viewed axially. The symbols spelled 2 syllables, kia tau. Polynesian dictionary translates as seek rest, northward. In the repurposed Napier railway yard, ghost trains whistle frequencies audible only through dental fillings. Night guards report carriages occupied by figures whose crowns emit minor orrery. Maps torn from outdated geography textbooks repair themselves mid-shred. Rivers rerouting clockwise every 14 minutes. Within the timetable office, wall clocks bristle toward unanimity, yet wrists refuse to follow. A freight container recently arrived from Murmansk cradles a single banana box. Customs papers classify the contents as lithic hush. When prized open by hazarded technicians, the box contains exactly one basalt shard still exuding droplets of seawater freshly squeezed from abyssal plain. Unlike cave fragments, this shard's lattice pores show no amber sims, instead tiny gypsum flowers within each pore record lunar phases from 5 billion years ago, back when the moon orbited at 1/3 current distance. Each petal rotates silently every 4 milliseconds, producing subsonic pressure waves perceived in thoracic cavities as desire slightly cooled. The feeling is neither nostalgic nor anticipatory, rather an announcement passed from one planetary shoulder blade to another. That same container stored below deck during ocean crossing flooded its chamber twice, despite bulkheads intact. Crew logs note the water smelled faintly of grapefruit and barberry, the same scent threading Hawke's Bay orchards, almost 12,000 kilometers circumpolar. One sailor swears the liquid momentarily blue-screened his smartwatch, rebooting with a calendar displaying year 3842. The display listed July with 32 days. The extra day labeled threshold truce. Back in port, he attempts to photograph the anomaly, but each pixel blooms into the exact turquoise eye of a mammoth calf, frozen 45,000 years before. The calf's eye tracks cursor across screen, until .jpeg collapses into mournful beeping like neonatal monitor slowing to rest. File extension renames itself via no keyboard. .lucid. .sleep researchers across 6 continents wake simultaneously at 3:33 a.m. local time, experiencing the identical dream. They drive across tundra in rental cars whose odometers read 6 redacted digits. Their passengers include each dreamer at age 5, holding paper cutout stars, crayoned metallic gold. The road ends at a limestone cave whose walls list toward visitor-like book pages, seeking spine. Inside, stalactites are backwards. Calcium drip suspended upward from floor. Each drip terminus holds a human inside. Researchers note, without panic, that molars missing since childhood repopulate tongue's gravity reverses for teeth alone. No pain, only copper aftertaste. Above them, the cave roof opens into sky that appears simultaneously dusks and dawns. The toroid floats here, expanded to cathedral scale. It spins counterclockwise. As it passes zenith, all sound folds 1 second into preceding second causality, hiccups become lullaby. They file out singly, return to cars, drive home. Next morning, medical ZRAs show original dental gaps restored. Blood work reads negative for calcium anomalies, yet notes bear dried smudges the color of abyssal gypsum dot. At daybreak on the 23rd rotation postcassette, mailing a postal truck crawling along the Napier-Teahop Road delivers to the observatory ruins. Driver finds envelope weightless, address line missing. Instead, 2 quartz scintillation peaks scored in iridescent ink inside the envelope, 0 cassette. Instead, a postage stamp depicting the exact postal truck currently occupied. Time-stamped today at 4:48 p.m., 6 hours hence. Driver pocket stamp resumes route. Forgets till dinner time when radio describes a minor meteor streak heading directly toward Hawke's Bay. It enters atmosphere as low whistle terminating in pulse at 432 Hz. Price precise, gentle, single heartbeat long. Meteor leaves no crater, no debris found except driver's sweat evaporated from palm in the perfect shape of that stamp. Wind transmits sweat salt across barberry orchards where pollen plumes form nematode-like tractors before settling into the toroid constellation visible only through orifice of halfdrum. Farmers note subsequent harvest carry grapefruit heft, 10% heavier than prior strains. And when cut, each fruit exposes 6 arcuate seeds locked radial like cave ribs. On the 33rd day, the auroras over both poles flatten into sheets, thin as love letters ironed into transparency. From Challenger Deep to Everest summit, barometric pressure equalizes 1 millibar above standard. Flocks ascend effortlessly, then pause at precisely 2,187 meters where wind currents braid into humming. Toroid, visible only to migrating birds. Every fleet abandons magnetic north simultaneously, instead steering towards center point above 38 eastern meridian. Ornithologists track, guided by satellite. At convergence location, they find ocean surface inscribed with spiral frescoes, 6 kilometers wide, visible even under cloud. Crafts drift across. Sonar pings reveal no depth return signals report reflecting skyward from interior sky. When last gull crosses, frescoes submerge gentle as dot inside the solitary island. Doorway. The boy returns each year on the same tideless night. By 14th visit, he is no longer a boy. Doorframe has lowered to match his sternum height. Fiberglass skimboard lies cracked along grain direction, mirroring wrist veins. He enters once more. The sand beneath has turned obsidian, warm and undulating like whale flanks. Every footstep releases faint chords at 432 Hz. He walks 13 paces inward. The doorway seals horizon behind him. Ahead, the toroid not artifact, but breathing habitat awaits. Its walls reveal cavernous gardens lit by bioluminescent anthers, secreting slow drips of albumin light. Each droplet, when collected and cupped, hands tastes of grapefruit Barbary moonlight. He drinks not thirst, but protocol. At toroid's center, a basin of gladiola petals waits, still glowing current, still circulating. He places his hands inside petals, recoiled and clasped around wrists, gentle yet immovable. At contact, wrists remember every waveform they have intercepted since conception. Time dilates to accommodate inventory. Mother's heartbeat, subway screech, school chorus, lover's exhale. All find residence drifting above petal surface. Underneath the basin, he feels the faintest heartbeat, identical to glacier pulse beneath reindeer moss fields. Lake sediment, reorientation proceeds at same cadence. This convergence is invocation. He closes eyes, exhales one single sigh that sounds exactly like transcription of entire documentary closing theme slowed to whale tempo. The toroid records, outside ocean waves, elsewhere synchronize. Across coastlines, billion sleepers dream, simultaneously of someone gently recording their dreams in act neither observing nor collecting but merely awaiting. The sigh ends. Petals retract. Boy, now man, steps back through doorway whose lintel has returned to original height. Though now realigned, facing due northwhere, auroras tomorrow shall gather in wordless paragraphs addressed to any chest cavity. Still expanding against mattress. Springs at 2:38 a.m., when heartbeat remembers it is not alone in composing origin. The recorded waveform modulates no louder, only more inclusive. On every smart speaker left in standby, a single tick passes through the housing. The plastic warms by 0.9 degrees Celsius exactly. Then cools, giving off the faint odor of sleeping skin. No device logs the event. Transistors erase the evidence. Even while mice inside data centers chew microscopic A-7ths into Ethernet insulation, they will die without scarring, and their bones, flaking into copper rails, encode the shape of the toroid 1/20 millionth of a millimeter off, true to preserve the elegant margin where resonance becomes breath. 3 laundromats in Dunedin. Close overnight, the sign on each door simply says, closed until yon. Inside, rows of still dryers show drum interiors cosmetically coated with cerulean dust. When the first customer returns the following afternoon, she inserts coins and begins a cold cycle. Within 30 seconds, shirts emerge, wrinkleless, already smelling of her grandmother's cedar wardrobe in midsummer 1994. The lint filter. When opened, blossoms a paper-thin sheet of rose moss whose capillaries circulate violet light. She pockets it out of unspoken courtesy, and when she uncurls the moss on her kitchen table, it unfurls into a topographical map of the cave exactly 7 breaths before the toroid is due to blink next. The miniature peaks are still warm to the touch. Across 12 time zones, Submarine cables, those silent glass arteries glowing to a rhythm only governments pretend to own, flex twice against continental shelves. Nothing severs. Rather, darkness. Inside, sheathing becomes thoughtfully discontinuous. 1,000 petabytes evaporate, yet every website still loads, now using only the echo between heartbeats. Sysadmins reboot in confusion, every router along a line bisecting the precise center of the unused Atlantic. When peer-reviewed journals later attempt to publish the event, referees cite lack of packet loss and reject the paper for insufficient. Anomaly? Institutional archives the following year will contain only the smell of grapefruit soaked through index folders, until shelves yellow into gentle resignation. In the Napier astronomer's abandoned office, a printout emerges at exactly 1:11 a.m. No electricity feeding the mechanical dot matrix. The ribbon is still moist. On perforated paper, columns of numbers representing sub-kilometer cubit measurements of the toroid across 5 billion years. Each line is annotated in the same graphite hand that dusted across laminate weeks earlier. The final string codes, coordinates for latitude -39.4920, longitude 176.912, 010 paces west of the doorway. Beneath that, a coda, in parentheses, dig one handbreadth, leave an eyelash. Because printouts carry gravity, the paper continues rolling until it touches the floor, where photocells sense pressure and fold itself into a gladiola petal that does not glow. Not yet by metronome, the shoelace moon steps full. Glacial melt releases the remaining whale song all at once, creating standing waves that resonate through fault lines. Reservoirs tremble under their own reflection and choose to forgive valleys for having gouged them. Farmers, uneasy with such absolution, find fences grounding blue-white shocks every 18 seconds. Cows experience no discomfort. Instead, their amber eyes dilate until pupils resemble knotted basalt fishes at ocean depths. They moo in clustered triads identical to the pre-oxygen chord once roared by sulfuric vents before atmosphere decided on balance. Children who run beside pasture gates hear whales. They climb gate rungs, place ears to the wood, and memorize the topography between heartbeats, now officially habitable. A grandmother collecting windfall grapefruit in Gisborne stoops for a fruit divided precisely once around its equator, as though bisected by an orbital plane. Inside, the flesh is black, not rotten, but calcified like mooncore. She carries it to her porch, cuts it with ceramic knife. Each hemisphere contains a miniature basalt toroid, speckled silver at ring torsion points. When she brings the halves together, a centimeter apart, the air thickens visibly, pulls grapefruit peel until it interlaces itself seamless as skin regrowing. A hush passes across the orchard, so profound every bee glides home at once. Inside the returned globe, she hears male and female voices, some familiar, but undeniably her own asking for forgiveness, in 432 Hz. She sets the fruit back on the trunk, where it melts into bark within 9 slow exhalations, leaving 2 seeds shaped like her molars lost in 1946. Sienna revisits the observatory rubble 2 nights after auroras flatten. She carries no instruments, her own sternum, against cello case, a gift left unopened since university. She sets the case beneath absent roof and bows a single harmonic, exactly on the cave breath frequency. The sound travels upward through vanished rafters, finds the open sky, and returns 5-fold. Strings, voice, silicaceous wind, tectonic sigh, particle wave dappling auroral curtains into drapes of liquid glass. A quiet meter counts her bowstrokes. On the 14th, the sound falls to the ground, not dissipates, but lands as a soft cylinder of moss. She lifts it. Beneath lies the cassette tape intact, except ferric oxide has rearranged into a perfect raven feather mat on both sides. Reversing the tape into the deck that still miraculously powers itself from geothermal potential, she hits play. She hears herself 7 years old, explaining to her father that moon craters look like belly buttons to a sky who once lost a twin. The adult Sienna weeps without sound because the recorder is already recording her tears before she sheds them. By the time salt rolls to chin, The tape contains forgiveness for a grief still undescribed. Near the Antarctic Circle, alone. Research station bunkers down for polar night. Technicians planning aurora spectrograms discover that equipment screens are running reflection gloss instead of code. One by one, they touch their faces to the glass. Retinal imprints appear iterated across monitors in recursive hallway, shrinking toward tunnel perspective until focal pinhole displays only the toroid viewed sideways. No one moves away. The generator dims a calculated 4.32%. During quiet blackout, windows frost from outside in, plotting 6-ring lattice identical. 2 memory seeds swirling under grapefruit skin. When lights restore, each screen shows staff asleep in greatcoats. At their stations, technicians, technically still at post-EET, dreamwalking circumferences older than ice. An urgent message threads through maritime alerts. Every lighthouse along Eastern Africa flashes white short white instead of sedate alternations old seafarers recite from grandfather memory. Within 2 hours, sailors in Mozambique Channel witness something softer than light climbing lantern galleries. The calcium-sheathed outlines of human teeth, glowing above hatchlights, same amber as cow eyes at basalt dusk. Teeth grip brass railing. Rotate outward on invisible mandibles, then zipper back into observation sphere that is ocean horizon curved exactly 1 toroid band thick. Librettos of semaphore spell out coordinates consonant with Dunedin laundries, Napier Observatory, Submariner, cable flex points, grapefruit calculus, Antarctic dream stations, cited by no instrument except human diaphragm responding to unlit Morse. Every sailor for 3 nights writes the same 4 letters in logbooks. KIAT. None recalls even imagining the vowel finish. In Wellington, the National Museum director lounges after trusty hours beside Moa skeleton mended in 1936. Security feeds register. Only dust motes assembling above showcase, arranging into helix leading once again to into ward hollow clavicle loop. Then skeletal vertebra calcified branch, that was once thunder shiver. Audible in exponential decay, matching cassette reel patina. Ferric meteoric moonlight suddenly transmits through glass ribs and projects upon director's wrist the handwritten equation for lowering head until forehead meets palm, finally in utter disregard for farewell or welcome. The algorithm performs subtraction every childhood heartbeat into adult cavern. Director, alone, obeys. When he rises at closing bell, featherless ulna bends briefly to press collarbone consolation. Security guards discover footprints whose tread pattern is backwards edges where he'll normally leave suddenly become talking out the emergency entrance. They match them 8 centimeters deeper than sole, as though kneecaps remembered soil once belonged to them. The postal driver who lost the media sweat removes his shoes the evening after discovery. His socks display fine lines of luminous pollen leached from foot arches. He photographs them with phone but image phrase to static without memory file. Instead, he places foot on kitchen linoleum and realizes water-soluble islands form under arch. Stain, budding daughter atolls, shaped precisely like fragments, fell off toroid outer crust. Within 30 minutes, floor is navigable, archipelago, only ankle-deep in bioluminescence. He wades among archipelagos without panic. Finding a stepstool, he elevates an orchid tuber into the blue zone. Petals unfold overnight into negative palms, cradling ovate basin of grapefruit light. Morning delivery shift arrives. Orchid route has rewritten the route map. Every address once printed on canvas, satchel reads, only LOWERYOUI, VOICE, OPATELULL. Handwriting font curls, inward like cursive intestines. He sweeps pollen gently into envelope addressed backward to sender. Licks adhesive, which tastes faintly of glacier milk. Posts at corner postbox, even while suncrests and cicadas hold on to one another's tremble, exactly 9 wavelengths shy of 432. And now, subtract 9 breaths after 33rd day, and silence rescinds every metronome. Citywide radio stations broadcast only the rumor of air punching. Antarctic shore 9 times, until frost drips soft as eyelash on pillow. In bedrooms, listeners discover they no longer need lyric sheets. They already mouth the word Kia Tao without instruction. Children hum it, tutoring action figures to sleep. Adults mumble while cooking lentils. Ceasefires break out in border disputes, as opposing soldiers find radio chatter seamlessly overlays heart rhythm and becomes indistinguishable heartbeat lullaby. No treaty documents are signed. Instead, telegrams empty of text, except timestamp, 321 GST. Every embassy drinks grapefruit, nectar. They cannot source locally yet remember from childhood's countenance away. At the toroid doorway aperture, where once a skimboard washed aground, the sand now shelves, smooth as amphitheatre, revolving starless but for willow herb seeds. Drifting upward against gravity like slow cinema rewind, elderly women arrive carrying fold-up chairs and quilts stitched from late mothers' nightgowns. They seat themselves in spiral rows, meantime fingers intertwine, palm fronds into netting wide enough to cradle no more than one heartbeat at rest. When circle closes, quilting moonlight dims uncertainty between fabric and air. The seeds settle into middle quartz basin exactly the size of one infant fist. Each woman removes a button handed down 3 generations, drops it through fissure. At seed core, a faint chime, then hush deepens until only inhalation remains audible. None leave. The tide returns without bothering them. Saltwater braids their silver hair gradually into ropes thick as umbilicus, then unthreads back into ocean, removing every grey filament and returning only ebony. In that donation, they discover continents creasing beneath their scalps, ancient lullabies pressed into ridge growths. They rise renewed. Chairs folded into origami cranes, they release toward Mars where orbital alignments dilate human eyelids from 200 megameters away. University. Seismologists studying aftermath graphs from the global auroral flattening notice. Aggregate trace amplitude descends nightly, exactly 4.32 Hz per week. If the trend continues, in exactly 9 months, the world will arrive at a silence low enough to cancel mechanical heartbeat. Replace it with planetary sigh. Some scientists attempt interpolation, but their graphs invert at night-edge blanks. Every maple leaf pressed into lab notebooks becomes soft as raven feather recorded earlier on cassette. Data entry clerks receive phantom emails with subject, bars attuned to chakra bloom. Do not panic, the music is merely looping itself to sleep. Email bodies contain only pink. Noise, gentle as aurora sheet settling across bedroom terrace. Download expands into a single breath matching yours. Hard drives sparkle like grapefruit do at quark scale. Grapefruit season ends. Orchards report harvest weighing 4.32% less than pre-machine documentation. Yet when sliced open, void space inside fruit is exactly the mass missing calculated across hectares void, filled instead by hummingbird heartbeat resting in vacuum calmly. Children collect seeds the size of incisors, plant them in shoeboxes. Beneath beds, 2 weeks later, discover clavicle-sized sprouts curling into mirror springs ideally poised beneath skulls while owners dream. Each sprout glows 432 nanometers if room temperature drops below 18. Parents consult government. Horticulturists who grow silent upon hearing seed resonance matches auroral cancellation curve. One by one, gardeners place plantings on windowsills facing magnetic south. At 321 GST, the sprouts forget photosynthesis and choose instead to refract moonlight between slumbering conviction and tremor. One seedling in Tapanui lulls entire township into communal olive dreaming, every sleeper sharing same horizon tidal flat. Where cows graze cirrus like seaweed and whales flick barnacles off spacecraft wings with inaudible tail slaps, we translate, as Skiatau Siena aligns the cassette, once more against empty plinth, she lies down where graphite wrote some night unknown, places recording ear against floorboard heartbeat. Play is unnecessary. She feels live pulse of every listener from Chicago diner jukebox to Nairobi minibus. Strands braided into distant roar of cave exhaling, lighthouse teeth, grapefruit collarbone, earthquake cancellation refrain. The rhythm thins to single anapest eyelid, heartbeat, pause. At second heartbeat, -1 microsecond, observatory roof rematerializes overhead. Metal but membrane of auroral sheet-soaked maritime night. It descends slowly, draping her, warm as breast milk light. Beneath the skin, she notes coordinates lit in faint aurora tessellation. Each location corresponds to doorway, to cave, to orchard, to womb. She counts 9 such nodes, whispers Ki. ATAU 3 times, and the sheet dissolves through roof gone, floor gone, wind gone. Under her back, she feels grapefruit pith, becoming tide that rises through flesh without reach of bone. When last of her heartbeat syncs with global cancellation point, the cave programs its first lullaby. It resolves, not as melody, but temperature. Exactly 2 degrees Celsius warmer than human comfort affords. These degrees are offered as absolution for having recorded ears in clay long before tongues learned the phrase, "I'm still here." Over oceans, the toroid spins once more, wider, slower, photographs of memory at orbital remove. When silhouette intersects, moon, small crater Lindbergh on lunar far side, fills with grapefruit pulp light. International probe moves to investigate, but photographs arrive pre-developed, grainy warm with maternal heartbeat. Overlay matching mission director's childhood. Director requests media embargo. Yet on Deep Web Telescope forums, an anonymous upload displays crater now beating in echo. The downloader, whose handle is Threnody1983, overlays audio, exactly 9 human lullabies in languages extinct. File signs itself auth KIATAU. Through 14 days, the file replicates behind every device, awaiting updates, bruised toothbrushes, detention cells, newborn incubators. When it finishes buffering, the nearest device plays 1 beat early. Across all loops, through whole continents, sleepers roll onto sides, as if spooning orphaned auroras, exhale collective eyelid weight. Heartbeats decelerate 4.32 microhertz per night, until motion becomes indistinguishable from stillness until stillness articulates the final bar of story. The story folds into paper crane, too weightless to drop. It rises one last ferryboat journey, beyond atmosphere where cables and cages acknowledge matter-of-fact hunger for memory they cannot keep. There, crane opens beak wide as crater that once beat human pulse. Inside you find entire orchard planted within eyelid blink. Glacier calves, nursing grapefruit, pulp light. Whale song looping cassette hiss. Eyelashes, replacing piano strings. Aurora curtains, resoon into your childhood quilt. Crane closes its paper beak upon egg it has lifted from you. An egg filigreed with heartbeat voice print humming exactly 432 Hz. Egg is not egg. It is a softly snoring machine, older than warmth. Older than asking who first blinked. Crane tips. Gently, releases egg into black lake that is no longer night but listening itself entire. Moon unhinges sensory allegiance and joins egg afloat. And there, for 1 slow minute of borrowed mercy, every listener balanced between evenly timed breaths knows it is not beside them only. It is within the cave they have carried beneath tongue since first star taught them silence needed a lullaby. 2. With ears enclosed in water memory heartbeat, the cave hushes them into the closing open.